Well, good morning, boys and girls. Today, we'd like to call class into session. We'd like to talk about the color revolution. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what is a color revolution? Well, according to Wikipedia, which is not entirely reliable, by the way, color revolutions, and they use the British spelling COLOUR, were a series of often nonviolent protests accompanied by attempted or successful changes of government and society that took place in the post-Soviet states, particularly in Georgia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The aim of the color revolutions were to establish Western-style democracies. They were primarily triggered by election results widely viewed as being falsified. Kind of like here in the United States during the 2020 election. But nonetheless, the color revolutions were marked by the use of the internet as a method of communication, as well as a strong role of non-governmental organizations in the protest. Some of these movements have been successful in their goal of removing the government. For instance, the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia's bulldozer revolution, Georgia's Rose Revolution back in 2003, Ukraine's Orange Revolution in 2004, Kyrgyzstan's Tulip Revolution in 2005, and Armenia's Velvet Revolution in 2018. These have all been described by political scientists as a wave of democracy between the revolutions of 1989 and the Arab Spring in 2012. Now, once again, I have to remind you, democracy is mob rule, best analyzed as two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. You know how that's going to go. So that is what democracy is, and that's why we do not like democracies. We think democracy is a bad form of government. What we like is a representative constitutional republic. Now, that's what we used to have here in the United States. There was a constitution, and that constitution was a set of rules, and it didn't matter which party was in power or even which person was in power because they all allegedly had to obey the Constitution. Constitution in the United States, of course, loosely based upon the Judeo-Christian ideas of the Bible. For instance, you shouldn't murder anyone. You shouldn't steal their stuff. Those are two central parts of that. And then the Second Amendment, the reason why it's the Second Amendment is because the First Amendment, which gives you the right of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and, most importantly, the right to seek redress from government, J6. That's all in the First Amendment. Then they gave us the Second Amendment, which is loosely based on Luke 22:36, where Yeshua, the mighty God in Christ, said, and I quote, "If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." And, of course, that was very important back then because most people only had one, maybe two suits of clothes if you were wealthy, but poor people really had just one suit of clothes. And he said, sell your clothes and go buy a sword. Why would he say that? Because it was against the law for a Hebrew to have a sword. But he said that because he realized that the government was not going to treat you well, and you needed to be able to defend yourself against the government's soldiers. The desire of Luke 22:36 was that every citizen should be armed as well as every soldier. Because, as Robert B. Heinlein pointed out so well in his book Beyond This Horizon, an armed society is a polite society. And there was a woman heroine in that book, and they asked her, "Why do you carry a weapon openly?" And she said, "Should I not prefer the dignity of being an armed citizen?" But I digress. Getting back to the color revolution, the idea was to put Western-style democracies in these countries. Was that a good idea? I'm not sure it was. The first student movements of Optor, which translates to resistance, in the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, founded at Belgrade University in October 1998, began protesting against President Slobodan Milosevic during the Kosovo War. Many of them were already veterans of anti-Milosevic demonstrations. And, of course, what we had going there was we had a situation where the Muslims were killing the Christians, and the Christians revolted. And they said, we don't like being killed. And so they stepped up because they understood if they didn't get Islam out of their country, it was going to destroy their country. And of course, that's why the United States went in on the side of the Muslims. But I digress once again. The Yugoslavian general election activists opposed the government of Milosevic, and they created a unified opposition and engaged in civic mobilization through get-out-the-vote campaigns. This approach has been used in other parliamentary elections in Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Croatia. However, election results were contested, with the Federal Election Commission announcing that the opposition candidate had not received the absolute majority necessary to avoid a runoff election, despite some political sources believing he had earned nearly 55% of the vote. Discrepancies in the vote totals and incineration of the election documents by the authorities led the opposition alliance to accuse the government of electoral fraud. You know, like when Joe Biden got 81 million votes. But anyway, I digress once again. The reason I'm talking to you about color revolutions is because this is what we're seeing going on across the United States, starting right now in Los Angeles. The objective is to remove the Republican form of government we have and to replace it with a democracy. And, of course, bring us into the one-world globalist government with a benevolent dictator. This is very dangerous, what you're seeing going on. We now know that Gene Wu, a Democrat in Austin, is financing the No Kings protest that's going to take place here very shortly in Texas. Once again, this is a clear case where we have a communist that is trying to overthrow the representative constitutional republic and replace it with a, quote, democracy. And to prove that there's a democracy, they're going to print up all the ballots, and they'll even vote them for you because, well, they don't want the unwashed masses out there making choices. So if you look at the history of the color revolutions, you see that's exactly what's going on here in the United States. And if that doesn't worry you, it by God should. Luke 22:36 is becoming a necessity. Even Michael Quinn Sullivan said he's going to start carrying heavy arms for a while because he's a little worried about where things are going. And ladies and gentlemen, we can lose Texas. We can lose the United States. It is absolutely time for you to do two things. First of all, it is time for you to get on your knees and seek the counsel of Almighty God. Secondly, you have got to start calling your state reps, your state senators, your national reps, your national senators, and letting them know where you stand and what you expect. Because if you don't do this, we are going to lose it all. And I know it's difficult because a good lot of you listening to me right now, you are working your fingers to the bone, so to speak, to just pay the taxes, keep a roof over your head, and try to be able to go on a vacation once a year with the wife and kids. Well, I understand that. I was there for many years. You've got to take some time out to do your civic duty because if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it for you.
You know, we need people to remember us and think good things about us every day. We need to give gifts to friends, loved ones, and customers, and that's why you need to go see my friends Brian and Christina at crazynestcreations.com. There you will find amazing custom t-shirts, coffee mugs, and incidentals that are going to make their day. You can find a t-shirt for your honey from the great Stylized Owl collection, or something for your friend or client or customer to cement your relationship for years to come. Don't forget, you have to get reelected to be grandma, grandpa, aunt, or uncle of the year, and that requires gifts. So crazynestcreations.com gives you an inexpensive way to engender warm and loving feelings for a lifetime. crazynestcreations.com, crazynestcreations.com, crazynestcreations.com. Go there today. Get those goodies for your friends, loved ones, and clients. You won't regret it, and they're going to remember you.
On another note, everyone has heard the phrase that crime doesn't pay. Well, the adage appears to hold doubly true if you're trying to criminalize ubiquitous tech conglomerate Apple. Amid the ongoing anti-immigration and customs enforcement riots in California, the anti-republic color revolution is taking place in California. Opportunists have predictably tried to take advantage of the chaos by lining their own pockets, stealing stuff that is not theirs. The looting issue has been especially prevalent in California with this recent spate of rioting, similar to what happened in the aftermath of George Floyd's suicide. Stores with major brands like Apple and Adidas were looted amid the anarchy in downtown Los Angeles on Monday. KNBC noted that the police arrested only 14 individuals linked to the looting, even though there were dozens more. Local independent reporter Brendan Gutenschwager shared some video, which I'm going to show you some of today, and it'll be on the Saturday show as well. Los Angeles Police Department officer Chris Miller told reporters that at least one woman had been apprehended in connection with the Apple Store thefts. Alas, who else may have been involved in looting iPhones from the Apple stores, likely are not enjoying the fruits of their labor. That's because, thanks to another video shared by Gutenschwager, it appears that Apple had a contingency and an ominous message for would-be shoplifters. So check this out. That, my friends, is the sound of an iPhone that has been offended. And I don't know, if you can't see the video, I'll tell you what it says. It says, these phones need to be returned to the Tower Theater because they have been stolen and they are deactivated and cannot be used. So they left like 8 or 9 of these just laying on the curb because, well, that message went off as soon as they walked out of the theater with them. And so this is how Apple works. The truth is, you can't steal an Apple device and get away with it. You just can't. I had somebody try to steal my iPad one time, and I tracked it to his home. And, of course, the police at that time didn't know about that, and they wouldn't let me in the house. But I reported it to the thug's mother, and he worked at a McDonald's. So the next day, I got a message that my iPad had been returned to the McDonald's it was stolen from, and that I could come and pick it up. So that's how that worked, and I was just glad to get my iPad back, because at that point in time, I mean, that thing was like $1,400, and this is back when that was actually some money. So in any case, all those iPhone thieves, they're going to be caught. If they touched the screen, they left a fingerprint, they're going to get them. And they're going to have to pay some hard time. You have a choice, and you chose Freedom 1300.